the ban dropped. So, it's a worrying precedent for anti-doping.
Variables need to throw into the case, but to me it screams of a double standard.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. I mean, I think it was. I mean, personally, I've always been hugely skeptical of Froome, and as you say, when you're at twice the threshold for salbutamol, you certainly, as a layman looking at it, you would think that's sufficient to indicate guilt or to indicate wrongdoing or culpability. But at the same time, you always, I'm not a doping expert, so you accept that there was a process outlined in the WADA code whereby Froome had the opportunity to replicate that result by undergoing pharmacokinetic testing, and had Froome somehow, and he seems to be a bit of a miraculous man, managed to recreate these conditions in the lab, then you or I might not necessarily have liked the verdict, but we could have accepted it because the process had been respected. But here, by contrast, it seems that there actually seems to be a contradiction inherent in how WADA described how it reached this process. Because it said in the WADA code, it said the athlete is required to undergo pharmacokinetic testing to replicate the conditions. Then in their statement yesterday, they essentially said it wasn't possible for Froome to undergo pharmacokinetic testing to replicate this result. Therefore, we absolve him, which is a contradiction.
That's the burden of proof getting all skewed there, Barry, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's the most interesting, or one of the many interesting things about this case is, somewhere along the line, when this process started, the burden of proof lay with Froome. Somewhere along the line, and he must, whether it's, I guess, kudos to his legal team, that burden of proof somehow passed from Froome to WADA. And, that's, again, that's coming back to the point, that's a worrying precedent or an interesting precedent, certainly for anti-doping, because where does the burden of proof lie for future anti-doping cases? And, it's interesting, over the last 10 months, everybody in cycling, we've all been comparing this Froome case to the Alberto Contador case of 2011. Alberto Contador tested positive for clenbuterol in the 2010 Tour. He continued to ride and was eventually sanctioned in early 2012. And in that case, people were upset that case had dragged out for so long. It took almost 2 years, it took 18 months for a decision to be reached. When a decision was eventually reached, it was the correct one. It was strict liability. It was, Contador was handed a backdated 2-year ban. He was stripped of the Tour. He was stripped of the Giro. And my understanding on that case in particular is that he might have got a reduced ban had it not been for the fact that the then Spanish Prime Minister had sort of waded into the argument and said that Contador should be cleared. And at that point in time, WADA and the Court of Arbitration for Sport took, this idea of government interference very, very seriously, and things like that actually backfired. And so throughout that case, the process ultimately at international level from WADA and from UCI and from CAS was respected, and Contador was given the ban. In this Froome case, it seems the opposite. The burden of proof, as you said, passed to WADA.
Yeah, it's like Lance Armstrong at that time saying extraordinary allegations requires extraordinary proof. It's like, well, they don't. You're supposed to prove that you're innocent when we find anything against you. That's how this anti-doping system is supposed to work, which means the whole thing is screwed, basically. And that's, pardon me, Froome is saying that this is big for him, for Sky and for cycling, and he's dead right that it is big for cycling, because ultimately it means that anybody with the resources now can challenge anything. What does it mean for the race itself? Because Froome obviously is in really good form, and it looks like he might be an unstoppable force when it comes to trying to win his fifth and join all of the greatest cyclists in history as a 5-time winner of the Tour.
Yeah, well, just to come back to the first part of that point, I mean, it's not just about riders testing positive and having the resources to fight this in the future. It's also, I think, if there's a doped rider out there preparing for this Tour de France, and we strongly suspect that there are plenty, they'll be thinking, we already know that testing is quite inadequate, that it's, you tend only to test positive if you've made a mistake. If you're now these guys will be pushing the envelope in a way that maybe they mightn't have done before, because they'll be looking at this thinking, WADA, UCI, they don't actually have the appetite to chase. They don't either have the appetite or the financial clout to go after dopers. But specifically talking about the race, which, I guess the race that will go on one way or another anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think Froome will be the heavy favourite to win this tour. He's surrounded by the strongest team. Logic would say that a rider who's won the Giro would then pay for those efforts at the Tour. It's 20 years since a rider did the Giro Tour double. That was Marco Pantani back in 1998. In the intervening period, riders like Alberto Contador, Nairo Quintana have attempted this Giro Tour double, and they've either won the Giro and struggled badly at the Tour, or they've fought, like in Quintana's case, they've fallen between two stools and not quite performed at the level in either. Normal rules logic don't seem to apply to Froome. He won the Giro with when a rider reaches the third week of a Grand Tour to tire. In Froome's case, his performances seem to improve in the final days of the Giro. Similarly, this time around, again, you'd expect a rider who's won the Giro coming into the Tour.
On to Chris Froome across the 21 days of the Tour, and however bad he had it with urine and spit being thrown at him over the recent seasons, you can expect that it's going to be fairly similar from the French cycling public for the next 21 days, especially after what's just happened. Yeah,
I think so, but I don't think... I think it's strange with Froome. I think people formed their opinions early, either in 2011 when he made this sort of dramatic metamorphosis into a Grand Tour contender, or in 2013 when he won his first Tour and delivered these quite unusual performances in the high mountains. And I think all that's happened in the intervening period is people's positions and opinions have become a little bit more polarized, a bit more entrenched. So, I'm not sure whether Froome being cleared, if the case had been hanging over Froome coming into the race, there would have been, the same level of scrutiny from press and public. The fact that he's been cleared probably hasn't altered things too much either. All
right. Barry, great stuff. Thanks very much. And we'll definitely talk to you again in the coming days and weeks. That's Barry Ryan there. You should read his book, The Ascent. Sean Kelly, Stephen Roach, and the Rise of Irish Cycling's Golden Generation.
Just on your point there, the last question about the reaction to Chris Froome, it's a fair point made by Barry there with regards to people making their mind up early, but I can see there being a lot of vitriol. Cycling fans aren't stupid. They've had to deal with some of the most highly intellectual cases when it comes to doping, when it comes to their heroes being tarnished over the last 10 years. They've seen this stuff before, and to have read that WADA/UCI statement yesterday to say, nothing to see here, I hope everybody enjoys the cycling, is an insult to everybody's intelligence. And to think that people will climb up Alpe d'Huez on the 19th of July and just sit there and applaud them as they go by, when one of their own, let's not forget as well, the kind of French free British angle here, when one of their own in Romain Bardet is expected to contend quite heavily this year. There'll be chalk across the road seeing him climb the ascents. And then they see this Brit, Kenyan, climb the ascents and all these question marks around him. And this is an audience that have thrown urine at him 2-3 years ago. I can see this being one of the worst tours for crowd trouble, so to speak, directed at one single cyclist. I would be surprised if the cycling world wasn't furious at Chris Froome.
Of course they are. Because it's ruining the sport.
Exactly. It's completely destroying it.
And actually all sport, ultimately, because if you can get away with having twice what is the legal limit that everybody signs up to in your system, because you've got the money and the lawyers to be able to challenge it, then what sport is actually going to be able to have a set of rules that apply and are upheld? If you're a footballer and you need to take something but it's not legal, but you've got the money to get away from whatever possible ban is coming next, you're going to take it. Now everybody's just going to take everything. This is the floodgates opening.
Exactly. It seems that we've now been presented with evidence that there are a number of loopholes. And once you've got enough of a financial backing to get high enough to jump through those loopholes, you are going to be okay. And there's a number of previous salbutamol cases, as we outlined earlier on, that show that are evidence of this. And like it is incredibly grim. Is it surprising? Not really.
I'm a bit surprised that you can get away with having twice the legal limit or something when, like, the whole point of the sport is that you sign up at the start of every year, the start of every race, whatever it is, like the rules, the T's and C's of you competing in this competition are that these are the rules. And if you break those rules, we're just going to say you can't be part of it. But now we can't even apply our own rules. Yeah,
well, like I'm sure Team Sky are going to publish the full 1,500 pages of this Chris Froome argument over the next couple of days, because they did allow Esquire in to do a full VO2 max test of Chris Froome 2 years ago. So I'm sure they'll, this 1,500 page dossier is going to have some sort of holy significance around it, so like some sort of ancient Aristotle text or something over the next couple of weeks. The longer we go without seeing this thing, stuff
will leak. That's the one thing that you can be sure of now, especially given the antipathy that there's going to be towards Team Sky and to Froome. Stuff will start to leak, and there will potentially be some whistleblowers, I think.
Or maybe the dossier will get accidentally burnt in a campfire in Greece, and there'll be no backup of it whatsoever.
Let's move on. We're talking hurling, and the joy of the Munster Hurling Championship was absolutely something sensational. It came to a boiling point at the weekend as Cork managed to retain their title. We're going to speak with Fraggy Murphy in just a minute, but first, here's John Myler from last night's show.
I like that look, you could have rephrased the question to me and say you got your matchups wrong with Conlon and Damien, like why you put Spillane on them day one, and
what's the answer to that question?
Well, we got him wrong because I would say I got it wrong because we ended up putting Cullum on Conlon. And Conlon was unmarkable in the first half, and it was incredible. Anytime the ball went in there, he just got it turned over the back. So we had to do something. So it was a case of either Cadogan going back there or Cullum Spillane, and Cadogan was doing a good job on Peter Duggan. So it was simply a case then of putting Damien on Todd Collins and putting Cullum in full back, and that worked for us. And we're flexible in terms of the players. Players can play in different positions, and they have a freedom to do that. And that the game is so fluid today that maybe a guy might go better in a different position on different days. So look, it just worked yesterday, and hopefully we get it right the next day. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah.
Kieran Fraggy Murphy is with us. Good morning to you. How you doing?
Hi, John. How's it going?
Yeah, pretty good. There's nothing like back-to-back to make a team feel self-confident about itself. At what point did you realise that this group had something very special about them?
Yeah, well, I suppose when we kind of met up earlier in the year, obviously we were a new management team, but we were probably lucky in the sense that John was there last year, and you had that continuity taken over from Kieran, and that was probably the key thing. And probably in the first number of weeks when we kind of met, there was a bit of kind of feeling each other out, and I suppose the players were kind of maybe a bit concerned that we might change things drastically or anything like that. But I think once they kind of saw that we were just going to keep the continuity from last year, you could see the group really gelling and bonding together, and you kind of knew at that stage then, that we were in good shape, and we were kind of hoping that we'd have a positive season.
Anthony Daly was pointing out in his piece in the Examiner that you have a lot of leaders throughout the team, and it was particularly evident when the team was struggling a little bit, 8 points down, that a few key people, Harnedy in particular, I think he calls the ball on himself. Nash hits him with the puck out, and the goal comes off it. But it is that sense of this is a team who have a lot of players who've been around a long time, but they're not just players with experience. They are players now who are stepping up and deciding that it's their team and it's their time.
Yeah, certainly. I think when you look throughout our season, really, I suppose, we had a kind of an interesting league campaign since we had a lot of injuries. We were looking to kind of develop players. We found ourselves in a relegation final playing at home, under a lot of pressure. And the lads kind of came through that task. We faced into the Munster campaign then, and you were 9 points up against Tip, and 10 minutes to go, it's level, and the lads steadied the ship, and in fairness, they were able to pull it out. And the same against Limerick. Limerick went 3 points up. We brought it back and gave ourselves a chance. And I suppose throughout the campaign, the one thing that's been consistent is that when the kind of questions have been asked of the players, and tough challenges have been put in front of them, the lads have stood up and delivered, and that's probably the most satisfying thing from a management point of view.
How do you influence that? How do you make sure that that happens? And like, what do you put that ability down to?
To be honest, a lot of it is player-led. The one thing I say about this group is they're hungry. They want to achieve, they want to progress, and they want to learn. It's probably the one thing that this team has really kind of grown over the last few years is their ability to kind of react to difficult situations. I think from a management point of view, all you can do is just encourage fellas to take responsibility on the field and create that learning environment where fellas are willing to step up and willing to kind of put themselves out there to, potentially make a mistake, but you can't focus on the mistake. All you can do is just focus on trying to get the player into position to be able to kind of execute. And, from a management point of view, that's all we try to do to encourage the players is just have the confidence to go for it.
One of the things we were chatting about yesterday, Kieran, in the show was just in terms of specifics when it comes to the weekend's win over Clare was the situation regarding John Conlon and the management approach to that situation when things weren't going so well for Damien Cahalane on Conlon, and the fact that you moved Damien Cahalane just off him. You didn't substitute him, you didn't take him off, and Cahalane subsequently had an excellent game to conclude the match. Like, is that something you put a lot of thought into? Because the knee-jerk reaction, of course, will be to just hook the fella straight away as soon as it seems that he's having a poor game. But it seems that you've got more of an ability to chill out a little bit more and just see the brunt of the situation through.
Yeah, well, I suppose in a scenario like that, you really need to evaluate the whole position. And the one thing that was happening in the first 20 minutes is Clare were kind of outplaying us all over the field. And in Damien's defence, the quality of ball that was going into John Conlon was the issue rather than kind of Damien being the issue. John Conlon got the ball maybe 2 or 3 times out in front of him and took him on, and Damien kept him on the outside, which was great defending. John Conlon is playing the hurling of his life. He's an incredible player, and he's a fantastic guy as well on top of it. And there was once or twice where Damien kept him on the outside, and John hit the ball over the shoulder off his left hand side. And as a defender, you're asking Damien to do that, and then you're just hoping that John Conlon's going to hit a wide under pressure. We probably needed to just tweak it slightly in the sense, we put Colm over just to try and give a bit of support there, but we also needed to put more pressure on the ball out the field to try and cut out the quality of ball that was going in, because even when Colm went over on him for the next 5 minutes, there was still 1 or 2 decent balls that went in, and John Conlon got a free off Colm and stuff like that, with the quality of ball that was going into John the last there, and in his rich vein of form, it was really unmarkable.
What's your role in all that, Kieran? How much of that, as somebody who knows that side of the game so well, are you kind of having that conversation with, and how are those conversations in the white heat of a Munster final on the sideline? What's that like, and what is your role in all that?
Yeah, well, I suppose the one thing we've done as a management team is we've grown. I suppose we've had a lot of interesting situations throughout the Munster campaign, so it's helped us. I suppose the one thing we have is we've kind of trusted each other, and obviously you, John, as he kept telling you last night, he's 61 and he's so old and all that, but he does bring that experience. And then you've Donald O'Mahony, he's deputy principal up in Christians, and he's had a lot of campaigns with them in the Harty, and he brings a lot of experience and a lot of calmness. And like Sean Barry's there, and the kind of unofficial selector. Then Dr. Con is there as well too, who's always a calming influence. I suppose our kind of process is, we discuss it. I'm the mayor foreigner then, and we make our decision, and I go out then and communicate the changes to the lads and try and get the message across.
What's that like for you?
It can be difficult at times because you're trying to watch and you're trying to evaluate the game. You're trying to make decisions, that aren't rash, but you're trying to evaluate the whole position. I suppose my job then is to try and get onto the field when you're allowed on, which can be a challenge as well too at times with the fourth official kind of shouting at you and stuff like that. But it can be difficult in the sense that when you're running on to the pitch and trying to deliver the message to the lads, you're really missing maybe a kind of a minute or two of the play and stuff like that. and sometimes you can miss one or two kind of little small things. So you're relying on the likes of Donald and Sheahan when you come back to the sideline to kind of fill you in on anything that happened or any incidents that went on.
So when you're running onto the pitch with a water bottle, obviously to relay some tactical instruction as well, is it mostly you, what you're seeing? Are you having long conversations with John, and then John is basically telling you what message to relay? Or if you see something in an instant, are you getting in there immediately to relay the message that's going through your own brain?
Yeah, we have that flexibility. I suppose the one thing that John does with the team, and he does with the management team, is he trusts you, and he says, look, if you see something, just go do it. Obviously it needs to tie back into kind of our game plan and our structure. But more than, normally the kind of process really would be that you'd have the discussion with Donald, Sean, John and Dr. Khan, and then we'd agree to step and agree the message and I'd take off then.
You mentioned structure there. Obviously, the team that you were part of that won All-Ireland medals was one of the first teams in hurling history that had a proper structure that everybody could kind of look at and diagnose straight away, and most teams could do nothing about it. And then for a large portion of the last decade or so, it's kind of been a mix of styles. It seems as if the current team has kind of almost taken all the good stuff from your era, got rid of some of the bad stuff from the last decade, and kind of arrived at the perfect hybrid now for the group of players that you have. How do you describe the structure? What style of hurling are you playing at the moment?
I think we're just basically just playing kind of fast hurling, with a lot of movement and support play. To be honest, there's not a whole pile kind of to it really. It's just the style that suit the players. I think when you look across the team, all the lads have fantastic hurling ability. There's good speed in the team. There's a few kind of, we'll say, ball winners then kind of, in there as well too. But the main kind of focus on the team is kind of touch speed and movement, and that's our kind of key strengths, and that's what you try and focus on, and that's what you try and develop.
Yeah, so 15 minutes in and the game's not going brilliantly, and yet the team doesn't really change style or panic, or there's no sense of them reverting to type or pucking aimless balls in. It's like, okay, we're just going to keep going about the things that we think are going to work for us eventually.
Yeah, certainly. I suppose it's kind of things that you would discuss kind of during the week. No different to any other team. If you find yourself in different scenarios, I suppose the key thing that this team has learned down through the years, if panic does set in and we start launching ball down on top of the edge of the square, it just doesn't suit the dynamic of the team. So I think the lads themselves have learned that over the last number of years. That look, just keep going, just keep sticking to what we're doing, and you're just hoping that you can make one or two little tweaks to it. But ultimately, it's the kind of identity of the team that is the key strength, and that's what you just try and keep focus on, and try and make sure that you start implementing your game plan.
Is 4 weeks just 1 week too many? Would you prefer a 3-week break to the semi-final?
I suppose we don't care once we're in the semi-final first. But yeah, I think the continuity of the games in the Munster campaign has definitely suited us. 3 weeks, if you were to be kind of fussy, it would probably be the ideal scenario. But look, the one thing is we have a fantastic kind of backroom team, and it gives the likes of Stephen Tabb and Dave Nolan to kind of do an extra week's analyst, and like Declan Sullivan and Rory look after the physical side of it. So it's just a case of kind of healing the bodies maybe for the next few days, and then putting the plan in place to try and make sure that we're in kind of peak performance come the semi-final.
What's the expectation now then, Kieran, for the next couple of weeks and potentially months? Is it like a situation like last year where the Munster title was enough, or are the Cork people starting to expect now where you're getting back to the days where it's an All-Ireland title or nothing?
Yeah, well, I suppose, look, the Cork supporters are fantastic. I only just kind of saw a tweet there yesterday saying that, I think it was 2016 Munster final, there was like 20,000 at it, whereas the last 2 years where Cork has been there, it surpassed the 40,000 mark. no matter what sport it is, you look at Cork City at the moment, Munster Rugby, whenever they decide to come down to play a game down here, there's always fantastic support, and I think the Cork people just want to support the team. They want to get behind the team. Even the Munster football final last day, 27,000 at it. The Cork public are hungry for sport, they're hungry for success, and they're going to get behind the team like they always do, and they support the lads no matter where the game is on or how the lads are going.
Well, listen, best of luck, Fraggy. Thanks very much for taking the call this morning. Cheers.
Cheers, lads. Thank you.
It's Fraggy Murphy, part of the Cork backroom team there, giving us his thoughts after back-to-back Munster titles were secured at the weekend by Cork. It's hard not to make them favourites at the moment, given the way Galway and Kilkenny played. I mean, obviously, Kilkenny are coming again, it seems, which is just a bit strange considering how well or otherwise they performed earlier on. But Galway need to get that out of their system pretty quick. Yeah,
it's also hard to not love this Cork team. It's also hard to not have a very, in my case, begrudging respect and love for this team.
You don't mind the Cork hurlers?
No, I'm joking. There is so much to like about them, from the management team, from the way they're playing, the young talent that have just come in and said, all right, this is senior hurling, is it? No problem. Absolutely no problem. As likes of Mark Coleman and Darragh Fitzgibbon have been doing for the last 12 months or so. Absolutely outstanding young talent and kind of explosion out of nowhere, really. Yeah, I think that young talent coming through there and coming through in Donegal, if I was a Mayo football fan, I would have some hope that we still have class footballers in enough of the key positions that all we need is 2 or 3 young lads to come and burst through and go, oh yeah, I can do this too. I just want to play you this. It's Tommy Walsh on training 6-year-olds from Championship Sunday.
I love being involved with the young lads at home, and it's not that you're trying to give back to the club at all. I just love it. And you're there, and you're just there in the field, and you just do the hour and try and coach and this and that, and there's everyone involved, parents and...
Go on, let us in on the secret then. Tommy Walsh is out with the under 6s. What's the key point you're getting across?
Timber. Physicality. It's very important to get that right at an early stage. So if they don't come with that aggression, they're sent home with their parents to 50 pressos before they go to
come
bed.
Back next week with the manic aggression, lads, or don't come back at all.
Well, there's all you have to tell them is no Cocoa Pops for the week, and they'll be up for that shred session.
Oh yeah, that's class. Okay, so some stuff to tell you about. Fixtures have been made. The Saturday the 28th, Sunday 29th of July. It's Galway or Kilkenny versus the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship quarter-final winner, and then it's Cork against the other quarter-final winner. That's a long way away, I think.
It feels a long way away. It's it's the fact that those who finish third in their round robin group will have that game under the hard ground again, just that little bit closer to the game. It's a confidence builder. It's not it's obviously not a guaranteed win, but it will be a gigantic shock if any of those round robin third places ended up losing to the Joe McDonagh Cup finalists. Yeah. It would be, in fairness, and it's a nice game for them. It's a nice game to ease them into the knockout stages of the championship, and there could be a couple of big casualties there when it comes to the provincial finalists losing in a game against one of those third place teams, although they're not massive shocks in essence.
2 last quick ones on this. Andy Dunleavy says, I want you to start a new bandwagon for everybody to start supporting Colombia, if only for one day. That's like your Buffalo Bills bandwagon.
Yeah. There's plenty to love about Colombia, as the sun tells us.
Andy, good call back to last January. And Jar sounds like he can do it some salbutamol. Yes, indeed, Brian. Thanks very much for that. I'm off to go and get some. Apologies for hawking my way through the show this morning, and I realise it's pretty gross. So if you managed to stay listening through all that, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're going to finish with this. It's Boris Becker. I don't know if you've been following the Boris Becker story, but it is absolutely amazing. So Becker at the moment is facing bankruptcy proceedings and massive court cases. He had claimed diplomatic immunity on the basis of the fact that he had a passport now from the Democratic Republic of Congo?
Central African Republic.
And that because he was a cultural attaché, he therefore couldn't get prosecuted. Screw you people coming after my money. It's all a big conspiracy. Then it emerged that the documents that he'd been given were a fake passport, and it was like, I don't get diplomatic immunity for a fake passport. But the BBC, the good old BBC, don't give a shit about any of this, and they just want him to be part of their Wimbledon coverage, which I fully agree with. I wholeheartedly endorse that decision, because Wimbledon without Boris Becker involved would not be Wimbledon. So cue this very awkward, we have a little bit of housekeeping to do because you've got a bit of a situation there, Boris. Take it away.
Martina Navratilova and Boris Becker, welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Boris, first of all, I know it's been a very difficult, tricky few weeks for you. You've been in the papers.
Yes.
Everyone's saying, so what is your association with the Central African Republic?
Am I not always in the papers this time around? No. I was asked just quickly, I was asked by the ambassador of the Republic of Central Africa at the beginning of the year whether I want to get involved on a diplomatic level to help the country back on its feet as an attaché for sports, culture and humanitarian efforts, and I was honored. I met the President, His Excellency Mr. Touadéry, in Brussels and in Paris a number of times. They gave me official documentation, they gave me a passport, and so I started my course. Unfortunately, the Foreign Ministry made some comments about
that it was false passport.
That it was false passport. So I have the same questions because I'd like to help the country. And I was asked by the President, I was asked by the Ambassador, and I'm sure the President will find a solution very soon.
Okay, you've sorted that out.
Thank
anyway,
we just wanted diplomatic immunity from everything. Not wait in line at immigration.
Yes,
that's one of the things my friends told me. You bastard, you don't have to wait in line now.
We all want a diplomatic passport.
Apologies for that. I don't think that's okay, Boris.
You bastards! Ooh. I love Boris Becker.
It's really been the story of 2018. It's going to be hard to top this. It's just kind of whistle-stop tour through the centre of Africa. Boris Becker desperately looking for some refuge.
Coming up tonight on Off the Ball at 7 o'clock on the radio, Richard's Russia, John Gonzalez on LeBron, but actually they'll also be talking about the fact, and we didn't talk about this.
Oh, DeMarcus Cousins has joined Golden State Warriors, which is absolutely laughable. It's going to be an absurdly talented Warriors team next year. They've replaced the one position where they were a small bit weak, and now they've got 5 all-stars on their starting team.
Here's the video of how the announcement was made. Have a look at this.
Bing, bada, boom. Bada, bing, bada, boom. Bada, bing, bada, boom. There. It's done. I bet. I'm a warrior.
Yeah, so much better than the Man United video. The various ones, announcing Fred, and the previous one, which was Alexis Sanchez playing the piano. But Rajon Rondo's joining the Lakers. Is he no good anymore?
He's not what he used to be. I mean, playoffs, Rondo was a thing in the playoffs just gone, and New Orleans were unbelievable thanks to him kind of stepping up to a certain extent. But
Kawhi Leonard?
Well, Kawhi Leonard to the Lakers would turn the West into an already better thing than it is. It's already amazing. It would make the Lakers a serious challenger to Golden State. But Golden State have taken a massive step forward with this move. They're getting him for $5.3 million on a one-year contract. His Achilles is done. He's not going to play until January. He's one of the best big players in the league, outside of Anthony Davis, the best centre in the league. And it's the one position where you could have said Warriors are a little bit weak there. Not very weak, but a little bit weak. Now they've got an argument for a top 3 player in every single one of their positions, probably a top 2 player in each and every one of their positions.
Not bad.
For a league with a salary cap, this is the potential for utter dominance. They're probably going to do 3 in a row next season. I would be gobsmacked if they didn't.
All right, more of that tonight from 7. What have you got on World Cup Daily at 12:30?
Yeah, World Cup Daily at 12:30. England against Colombia tonight, Jerry. It's going to be England all the way. There's a couple of other interesting stories to bring to everybody's attention there as well.
Which you'll know a bit more about at 12:30.
And the big one, Switzerland versus Sweden, that kicks off at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, on tomorrow morning's show, we're going to be talking about Coppers the Musical with Paul Howard. We've got Brian McDonald from Russia about the impact that the World Cup is having on the general perception of Russia amongst the rest of the world, who are kind of finally waking up to the fact that the stuff that we were getting about Russia might have been a little bit one-eyed up to this point. We'll speak with John Duggan, our man in Moscow, who's at that England game tonight. Kev will check in with us as well. Joe and Nathan are at Ballyliffin for the Irish Open, and we'll know where England are at too, and whether or not it's coming home. It's coming home. You know it's coming home. We'll see you tomorrow.
OTB AM. Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.